So for any players that struggle with this chicken wing effect through impact, so that's that lead elbow, the left elbow for a right-handed golfer, very much bending through impact, that dragging of the handle through impact. Here's a nice concept or a nice perspective at least to look at, to explore. And we're looking at it more from the target side. So we're at the target, we're looking back at the player. Now, obviously, we can't do this in 2D. We don't want to get hit by a golf ball, but we have that luxury in 3D. So we're just going to trace the movement of the elbow. We got our pro golfer on the left and our club golfer on the right hand side. So let's look at our pro golfer first. And again, this red trace indicates the trace of the lead elbow in backswing. So we go into backswing, now into transition. We see that trace, very, very similar trace in the transition into downswing. So that lead elbow very much moving on a similar 3D path as it did on the way back. Again, all the way through down to impact. And we see again that yellow line very much on top of the red line. So very, very little change. Even if we were to zoom in here quite closely, we see very, very little change between those lines. So a lot of similarity in terms of how that elbow has moved in backswing and into downswing. If we're to look at our club golfer over here on the right hand side and do the same thing, so we see a little bit of a, let's say, an adjustment early on, an adaptation early on, the elbow moving out and away. However, as they move in transition, that nice trace, that yellow trace on the same trace or path as on the way back. So for the moment, that player keeping on the same path with that lead elbow. Here we see it move slightly off that red trace. And then as we work through impact area, we start to see the differences. So now we start just about here, just as we're approaching impact, where that speed is starting to magnify itself, we start seeing that lead elbow start to pull up and away from the backswing path. So now we see that separation between the red and the yellow line for our player on the right hand side. And if we were to continue on to shaft, parallel, and follow through, we'll see a couple of different differences too. So we work our way to shaft, parallel, and follow through. We can see the distance in the difference, or the actual difference in the distance, between the elbow and the golf club. We look to our player on the left hand side. We get to about shaft parallel in that follow through. We see that nice proximity of the elbow and the golf club. So not this big separation. We work our way a little further on the right hand side again with our club golfer. Where do we see that shaft pitch? If we work a little bit further, we see that shaft pitch very much pitch up in relation to the path that they've swung through with that lead elbow. So if we're just to identify the pitch of that shaft right here versus the yellow line that they've swung on, there's a little bit of a difference. We look to our player on the left-hand side, our professional golfer. We move a little bit further along in that swing as we go up. That shaft pitch at that point in time, nearly in a very, very similar shaft pitch, let's say, to what we get with that yellow line in terms of how that elbow has traveled through impact. So if we're looking at the differences between these two players, in backswing, transition, similar-ish in terms of the overall pattern. Then as we get through impact or towards impact, we see the player on the right-hand side adapt much, much more than the player on the left-hand side. So if you are one of those players that has the issues demonstrated by this avatar on the right-hand side, how is this going to help you? Well, the idea really is that we're looking at more forward planning. So for many times when we're trying to improve certain things in our golf swings, we look at what came before. Improve setup, improve takeaway, improve transition, etc., to improve what the lead elbow does. However, a nice concept can be the idea of forward planning. So looking at being in a certain position and then trying to get there and accomplishing the movements that are required by simply focusing on the end outcome. So if you are a player that suffers with that chicken wing, that motion through impact, the idea of can you work on the concept of as you get to that post impact position, shaft parallel, can you work on the idea that that lead elbow and that golf club would be more in a similar line? Can you work on the idea that as you would get post that point in time, when that shaft starts to pitch up, that it would be in line, let's say, with the trace of that left elbow might be a nice reference point. The player on the right-hand side, as they work through, again, as we work through that impact area, that left elbow very much pulling away from the club head and the shaft pitch being very much on a different tilt, let's say, than the path or the travel of the lead elbow. So just a nice perspective. If you are one of those players that suffers with that chicken wing, you can look at it from a different aim point, a different view line, and then really plan accordingly. More forward planning, more the idea of being in a certain position after impact can then affect enough things to happen before that to change what you're doing.